Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
All right, so Sam Seder, host of The Majority Report, did an appearance on CNN recently. A little bit out of nowhere. Maybe they mentioned this on the show. I hadn't seen anything about it. Seems like the Majority Report hosts are getting some of these mainstream media slots lately. That's interesting. I mean, obviously from the network perspective, their ratings are ass right now, and people on the internet like Sam Seder, they're getting a lot of the views right now, and even a lot of the audience that was watching MSNBC and CNN is drifting towards more online and in some cases more left-wing commentary. So they have an interest in trying to bring some of those people into the fold and maybe try to figure out what it is that they're doing that the mainstream network programs are not doing. But really, it's just kind of a fundamental difference in approach, right? And the independence of something like the Majority Report is the reason that they are able to attract the type of audience that they do, as well as, like I've mentioned before, them being a small and kind of lean operation allows for them to be very sustainable. And that is, I think, the thing that I respect the most about their program. So he sits on the round table of Abby Phillips' show. And, usually there's a lot of argument and crosstalk on this panel. This one was pretty tame, to be fair, for the most part. There's a couple people on the panel that you can tell Sam is kind of chomping at the bit, like he really wishes he could go at them. But I think the main thing that sticks out is that Sam is the one who really just kind of has his head on straight about the strategy that's happening here, both from the Republican side and the advantages that it presents. So that's what I've come to like about Sam Seder, and you do notice that a lot of these other people in the panel around him don't seem to think like that. So let's watch a couple clips real quick.
Vladimir Putin, smart guy, said you can't have an honest election with mail-in voting, and he said there's not a country in the world that uses it now.
Joining us in our fifth seat at the table is Sam Seder, host of The Majority Report. I don't know if President Trump forgot that he did this, but let me just play it. This is September 2024, about a year ago, when he said this to his own supporters.
You know that absentee ballots are about to go out in North Carolina? In other words, it's time to start thinking about let's vote. So important. This will be the most important election in the history of our country. So whether it's mail-in ballots, early voting, voting on the day, you got to get out and vote. We want to save our country. We're the only one going to save it. That other group of people, they're going to destroy our country. We can't let that happen. Go out and vote for Trump.
Mail-in ballots. He was fine with it.
Well, it was because his Republican strategists were panicking because they realized that they were going to lose without getting those mail-in ballots now. And I would imagine this time around, those same Republican strategists are also panicking because if he goes out there and starts to spread the word that mail-in ballots aren't going to work, this is going to be a real problem in the midterms for those Republicans. Plus the fact that he has no authority to do this. I mean, he tried to pass he wrote up an executive order a couple of months ago to deal with the voting, and he got shot down by 2 different federal judges. So there's really there's no path for him here, and it's sort of fascinating that all it takes is one suggestion from Putin. I mean, what were they doing talking about 2020 during these meetings? Like, he's like a cat. It's like no object permanence here.
Where
we're going to do this for the military as well.
But he said
the military votes mail-in ballots.
Yes, that's right.
The military votes?
In the last iteration of this, it wasn't included.
Well, I don't understand. If it's not secure for citizens, why isn't it not secure for the military?
Again, I'm not saying anyone can make an election completely secure from any fraud.
To your point, Sam, Donald Trump is messing with something that his voters use. Okay, 24% of Republicans used mail-in ballots in the 2024 election. That is a little bit down from 2020 when there was a pandemic, but it just goes to show that you then take those voters, some of them are in the villages in Florida, they're in Utah where they have they automatically send mail-in ballots to every registered voter?
The real story here, it seems to me, because you've got just a CNN poll out a month ago showed Democrats 75% more enthusiastic than Republicans at 50%. So if you're talking about getting to the election poll sites, the side that has more enthusiasm is a lot more likely to get there in the first place. This is Donald Trump worried about the midterm elections and trying to set up reasons why the Republicans are going to lose. I mean, this is a two-pronged thing. We're seeing it in terms of the redistricting, and then the other part is already start to build in the excuses. I mean, that's what's going on here, because he knows he's not going to get this past the federal judge.
There is a reason that the framers of the Constitution put this in the state's hands, right? And not so long ago, this is what the Republican Party platform in 2016 said. Federalism is a cornerstone of our constitutional system. Every violation of state sovereignty by federal officials is not merely a transgression of one unit of government against another. It is an assault on the liberties of individual Americans. They looked at 25 years of Arizona voting and found 36 cases of fraud. Georgia, 27 years, found 34 cases of fraud, so on and so forth. Not saying that there's no fraud, but A, that a lot of times, most of the time it gets caught, and B, most of the time...
How do you know most of the time?
Hold on. Okay.
It's an assumption.
Well, provide some evidence to the contrary.
Well, I can't, but you can't either. That's my point.
Well, how do we know there isn't fraud throughout the entire
Well, there probably is. But
listen,
I'm in favor of the countries where you have to dip your hand in the inkwell until you voted, and then you have it on you.
George Bush fired a bunch of U.S. attorneys because he insisted that they find voter fraud in their states. And when they couldn't find voter fraud, they ended up firing a bunch of them.
Yeah, so some interesting things going on here. It's quite refreshing to hear Sam's perspectives. I mean, anybody who's listened to him for a while definitely recognizes these points that he's bringing up. But it's nice to hear it here because he specifically designed these points to be something that cuts through the noise of the usual media rhetoric. And I think he displays that throughout this, where he's talking about, you know, why Donald Trump is doing this, the polling that they're probably looking at, as well as the structure of how these things work, that, you know, there are consultants around Donald Trump who are looking at the polling. So even if he doesn't care about that, if they start panicking about something, it's going to affect the way he talks about something. So when it came time to flip on mail-in voting, even in 2020, that was a reversal, of course. He had been talking about mail-in voting like it was fraudulent since months before the election in 2020. And so when he did this video, that was already contrary to what he had been saying about mail-in voting, but the people around him were telling him that he wasn't going to win unless he did that. So I think there's probably similar things in the air right now around Donald Trump, and I think it's probably true that Putin saying that to him was exactly what he needed to, you know, put that idea in his head and pursue it. And again, I think Sam's point that he's just kind of like a cat that's being led in a certain direction, I think is right on the money, because Putin knows that. He knows that that is one specific thing he's going to say that Trump's going to like to hear. And he's going to repeat it, and he's going to fixate on it, and he's probably going to try to do something, whether it's make a show or do some executive order. At first they said they were going to do an executive order, then it seems now like they want to go more the legislative path, probably because they know there is no path through executive order. But if they can do some kind of legislation, maybe at the federal level, and then also convince Republican legislatures in different states to, you know, change the laws on mail-in voting, that very well could happen. And that is exactly what happened after 2020. They already, in some cases, made stricter laws in certain states. So it seems like if, to the extent that they're going to remain focused on this, that is how they're going to do it, is through a pressure campaign. So that is more threatening to the, you know, election structure than the idea that he's going to try to just do an executive order or decree from the White House that mail-in voting is bad and illegal. He can't do that, but he can exert a lot of pressure. So we'll see. I mean, Trump really does seem to be quite distractible. And the more, as the days go on, he just picks more fights. And we're talking now about doing strikes in Mexico against the cartels. And he still wants to have a posture like that with Canada and with other countries like Greenland. Like, I genuinely don't know what that is. I don't know if that's a desire to keep everyone distracted, if it's some kind of compulsion. It's probably a mixture of both. So, I mean, even when Sam says that Trump knows that he's not going to get anywhere with a judge on this, I think it's more so that the people around him know that. I don't think Trump really cares about knowing anything. You know, I really think it's his worldview that he can change things at will. I will say there was a lot of focus on Putin on this panel, which is fair. I think there's value to that, because when you zoom out, Putin, I do think, is a very important figure on the world stage right now, particularly because Donald Trump is in power. And Putin just has inroads to the American presidency that he wouldn't have if Donald Trump wasn't president. So that seems to have gone back and forth a little bit in regards to the Ukraine war, and Donald Trump seems to have figured out that what Putin does has no bearing on what he says to Donald Trump in person. We'll see how that plays out after this most recent summit. It seems like the consensus on the recent summit is that Putin conceded nothing and Trump wants to look good, so he's just kind of going along with that, which makes it even worse. So I think that CNN and MSNBC are the main ones that get pointed to as focusing on Russia, especially in connection to Trump, as like the main issue, the most important issue. In a way, they're right, because the world has changed significantly. The international situation has changed significantly because of Putin. The same could be said for Netanyahu as well. The dynamic is slightly different, kind of inverse there. But, you know, I get why the mainstream media wants to focus on Putin as a boogeyman, but I think that it continually is the point where they get more out of touch. Whoever is doing the editorial work at these really mainstream publications is aware of these international situations, as well as, you know, the State Department line, what the government sort of wants them to and not to be saying about these things. You know, at the editorial level, they're aware of that in a way that, you know, the average public just doesn't really think about it. And so that's why this coverage comes off as, you know, disconnected. And so I think Sam is right to focus on strategy and the weaknesses that arise based on the things that Trump is doing. I think the main one being that he just can't do all of these things at once. And if he was smart and he was really trying to make specific progress on a specific goal, he would be doing so in a more concerted way. And you could argue a lot of this stuff is thrown out there as distractions while they're focusing on a concerted few things. But I think that's only true with people in Trump's orbit. I think Trump is truly in a spiral at all times. So what that says about where this mail-in voting thing is going, I don't know. I think Sam tends to opt for like the analytical, like, well, if the math just isn't there that the Republicans are going to win the midterms, then they're screwed, or that things are going the wrong direction for Republicans in the midterms. But I would say that's just not the operative pattern that we've seen. The operative pattern that we've seen is Republicans are kind of taking power in any way that they can, and it's working to rig the system in their favor. So Emma Vigeland's message on MSNBC a little while ago was, I think, quite sharp in saying that, you know, the redistricting thing is by far the best show of power that we've seen from Democrats. And whether it's that, mail-in voting, or whatever, any of these things, that's the only way to fight it, is to use your leverage as a state, a governor, a mayor. You know, we'll see what Zoran's able to do if he's able to get that mayoral spot. If he's not able to find some leverage to use against Trump and use it immediately, he's fucked, because Trump can leverage anything he wants against New York. And the only way he's not going to do that is if Zoran finds a way that he can use his leverage as mayor against the president, which seems like a tough thing to do, but maybe not impossible. We'll see. Anyway, that's off topic. Good performance from Sam here. I hope they keep going on these mainstream shows. Someone said when I mentioned in my last video that, you know, leftist movements and progressive movements tend to get co-opted. And someone said that you can't worry about that because that's how progressive movements get defanged. And I kind of agree with that. I think that you got to use any and all tactics that you can. You got to get yourself out there, and you have to be aggressive and not always so cautious. But at the same time, I also think part of what defangs movements is being integrated into a defanged system and institution. And so, in other words, a program like the Majority Report or others like it of a similar size, Secular Talk or whatever, they have more fangs because they're on the outside. And there's certain access they don't have, and there's certain resources they don't have because they're on the outside. But at the same time, the fact that they have an advantage that the inside doesn't have is starting to show. So it's good for them to build these inroads. I'm not saying they shouldn't do it, but I'm saying we should be cautious. We should be cautious about how comfortable we are with these mainstream platforms, because much like, progressives, people like Zohran Mamdani, Bernie Sanders, taking over the Democratic Party, as much of a stretch as that seems like, it's not that much of a stretch, and it is certainly the only hope for the Democratic Party, if there is any. And this is kind of an iteration of that, right? Where it's like the more progressive voices you start to see in these mainstream seats, that's a good thing, because that says that there are, the narrative is being pushed more in that direction. But at the same time, unless the power structure changes behind that institution, then the coverage, the editorialism is not going to change about that institution. And obviously Sam knows that. And because Sam knows that, Emma knows that, they all are aware of that. So I'm not worried about them. But it's just an interesting pattern to see. And we'll see how the mainstream, supposedly left of center media continues to adapt. Because if they're smart, they will have more people like Sam Seder on, because he gets at something that their hosts don't usually get at.